Admiral Vashi was having what could generously be called a terrible morning. His 3 eye stalks twitched in synchronized irritation as he stared at his quantum-encrypted communication console, which had been beeping incessantly for the past 17 standard minutes. The sound was starting to make his gill slits itch. "What now?" he muttered, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for beings who had spent too many cycles dealing with galactic bureaucracy. He pressed the acceptance key with one of his 7 tentacles and immediately regretted it. The holographic image of Warden Klexis materialized above his desk, all 4 of her eyes blinking in rapid sequence. That was never a good sign. When Klexis blinked like that, it meant someone had broken something important, or someone was about to break something important, or someone had already broken something important and was now pretending it never happened. "Admiral," she began, her voice pitched higher than usual, "we have a situation." "Define situation," Vashi replied, already reaching for his emergency stress relief gel. "Are we talking about a minor clerical error, or are we talking about the kind of situation that requires me to explain to High Command why our detention facility has somehow achieved negative existence?" "Well, sir, it's about our new prisoner, the one from Sector 77 Alpha." Vashi's leftmost eye stalk rotated toward his file console. "The smuggler. What about her? Standard processing, standard containment, standard everything. I reviewed the intake myself." "That's just it, sir. The processing system won't process her." There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. The kind of pause that suggested the universe had decided to take a coffee break right in the middle of a perfectly reasonable conversation. "Elaborate," Vashi said slowly. "The species classification system keeps crashing. Every time we try to input her biological data, the computer starts making this noise." "What kind of noise?" "It sounds like screaming, sir. Electronic screaming." Admiral Vashi felt his 3rd stomach begin to churn. In his 43 cycles of military service, he had seen quantum computers argue with themselves, artificial intelligences develop existential crises, and filing systems achieve sentience, just to immediately file a complaint about their working conditions. But he had never heard of a computer screaming. "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" 17 times, sir. On the 18th attempt it displayed a message that said, "Oh, come on. Really?" and then refused to boot up for 6 hours. Vashi's stress gel wasn't working. He squeezed another dollop onto his primary thinking appendage and rubbed it in circles. "Show me her file." The warden's image flickered as she presumably accessed her own console. "That's the problem, sir. When we try to open her file, the system displays species classification, see attached mythology text. Then it opens our entire entertainment database."
"Oh, what?"
"Entertainment database, sir. Fiction, legends, children's stories. The section we use for recreational reading during off-duty hours." Admiral Vashi stared at the warden's image. Then he stared at his console. Then he stared at the wall, which seemed like the most reasonable thing in his office at the moment. "Let me understand this correctly," he said, his voice taking on the measured tone of someone trying very hard not to lose what remained of his sanity. "Our maximum security detention facility, equipped with the most advanced classification systems in the known galaxy, thinks our prisoner is fictional." "Yes, sir. A work of imagination." "That appears to be correct, sir. Something someone made up for entertainment purposes." "The system seems quite convinced of this." "Yes." Admiral Vashi reached for a stronger gel. "And what does the prisoner say about this?" "She laughed, sir. She laughed for approximately 4 minutes straight. Then she said, and I quote, 'Yeah, that sounds about right.' After that she asked if we had any coffee." The Admiral's remaining dignity crumbled like a sandcastle in a tsunami. "What species did she claim to be during intake?" "Human, sir." "Human." He rolled the word around in his mouth like a particularly unpleasant medicine. "I've never heard of them." "Neither had our database, sir." That's when it started consulting the mythology section. Admiral Vashi closed all 3 eyes and contemplated the career choices that had led him to this moment. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the faint sound of his computer screaming. Commander Tom Marley prided himself on being a professional. In his 12 cycles of service as chief interrogator, he had successfully extracted information from Zephyrian mind thieves, crystalline thought weavers, and even a particularly stubborn quantum phase tax evader. He approached each session with the same methodical precision that had earned him 3 commendations and a stress-induced eye twitch. Today, however, his left antenna was practically vibrating with confusion. The human sat across from him in Interrogation Room 7, looking remarkably relaxed for someone who had been caught smuggling illegal quantum phase crystals through 3 different star systems. Her feet were propped up on the table, she was somehow balancing her chair on 2 legs, and she appeared to be humming. "State your name for the record," Marley began, activating his neural pattern scanner. "Amy Kowalski. That's A-M-Y, space, K-O-W-A-L-S-K-I. Would you like me to spell it backwards too? Because I totally can. That's one of our special human abilities." Marley's scanner beeped once, then displayed, "Errors, subject appears to be making jokes. Recommend recalibration. Your species of origin," he continued, ignoring his malfunctioning equipment. "Human. From Earth. You know, third rock from the sun. Mostly harmless. Excellent pizza." The scanner beeped again. "Error. Pizza not found in species database. Please define pizza." Marley felt his secondary brain beginning to ache. "What is pizza?" Amy's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, you sweet summer child. Pizza is only the greatest achievement of human civilization. It's like bread, but with stuff on it. Cheese, sauce, sometimes pineapple if you're feeling controversial." "Controversial?" "Yeah. There's basically a civil war about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. We've had fewer arguments about actual wars." Marley's scanner was now flashing red and making distressed beeping sounds. He switched it off and tried a different approach. "You were caught transporting illegal crystalline matrices. Standard punishment is 50 cycles in a rehabilitation facility. However, if you cooperate with our investigation—" "Let me guess," Amy interrupted. "You'll make me an offer I can't refuse." "An offer you cannot refuse?" Marley's confusion was becoming palpable. "Are you suggesting our legal system is somehow optional?" "It's a movie reference, dude. Godfather? Crime families? Horse heads in beds? Ring any bells?" Marley's third eye began to twitch. He had no idea what a godfather was, why anyone would put horse heads in beds, or how any of this related to their current situation. He made a note to have his universal translator checked for malfunctions. "I am unfamiliar with your cultural references," he said stiffly. "Perhaps we should focus on your crimes." "Crimes?" Amy laughed. "I prefer to think of them as undocumented business ventures, very entrepreneurial, very human." Across the facility, Judge Quintara was having her own crisis. She had been reviewing case files for the past 6 hours, and none of them were making sense. The human's file kept redirecting her to something called the Encyclopedia Mythologica, which was apparently their entertainment database's collection of fictional species. According to the database, humans were legendary beings known for their impossible resilience, inexplicable stubbornness, and tendency to survive situations that would kill any reasonable species. They were described as creatures who would look at certain death and ask if it came with free shipping. "This has to be a mistake," she muttered, cross-referencing the data with her legal precedent files. But every search came back the same way. Humans were filed under mythological species, see also impossible creatures, legendary stubbornness, beings who refuse to die when logic dictates they should. She called Admiral Vashi. "Sir, we have a problem." "Another one?" Vashi's voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a very deep, very dark hole. "Please tell me the computer has stopped screaming." "It has, sir. Now it's laughing." "Laughing?" "Maniacally, sir. But that's not why I called. According to our legal database, we cannot prosecute the human." "Why not?" "Because technically, sir, fictional beings have no legal standing in our court system. It would be like trying to prosecute a character from a children's story." Back in the interrogation room, Marley was beginning to sweat through his secondary pores. "Your species appears to be problematic for our systems." "Yeah, we get that a lot," Amy replied cheerfully. "Humans are kind of like that annoying song that gets stuck in your head. The more you think about us, the less sense we make. But somehow we're still there. Are you threatening me? No, that's just Tuesday for us. Want to hear about what we call Wednesday? Marley's stress indicators were now flashing colors that didn't have names in his language. He pressed his emergency call button. Security to Interrogation Room 7, he croaked. I need backup. Or therapy. Possibly both. Amy grinned. Or, you're starting to understand humans already. Welcome to the club, buddy. General Krufnog had seen many impossible things during his military career. He had witnessed stars collapse into themselves, watched entire planets decide to stop existing, and once attended a diplomatic dinner where the Zephyrian ambassador actually said please and thank you. But he had never in all his cycles of service asked his research department to determine whether a prisoner was real or fictional. Let me understand this correctly, he said, addressing his assembled team of xenobiologists, cultural analysts, and one very confused intern who had wandered into the wrong meeting. We have a being in our custody that our computers insist is mythological, but she is clearly sitting in our detention facility, making sarcastic comments about our coffee. Dr. Yelix, his chief xenobiologist, raised one of her many appendages. Sir, we've run every biological scan available. She's definitely organic. Carbon-based, oxygen-breathing, standard bilateral symmetry. But according to our cultural database, her species possesses abilities that violate several laws of physics, such as, Quartermaster, A stepped forward, clutching a data pad that was roughly the size of a small moon. Sir, I've compiled a comprehensive report on human mythology and folklore. The findings are disturbing. Define disturbing. Well, sir, according to these texts, humans are capable of surviving situations that should logically kill them, purely through what they call spite. They can function normally, while missing significant amounts of sleep, food, or basic survival requirements. They form emotional attachments to inanimate objects, and will risk their lives to protect said objects. And they have something called Florida Man. General Krafnog's migraine was developing a migraine. What is a Florida Man? We're not entirely sure, sir. The database describes it as a subspecies of human that appears to exist solely to confuse and terrify other life forms. Apparently they wrestle creatures called alligators for entertainment. Alligators? Large, aggressive reptilian predators with multiple rows of teeth, sir. According to the files, humans see them as fun pets. Dr. Yelix consulted her own notes. There's also something called holding my beer, which appears to be a ritualistic phrase humans utter before attempting impossible feats. The survival rate for these attempts is statistically significant despite being logically zero. The general felt his left brain beginning to shut down as a protective measure. Are you telling me that our prisoner belongs to a species that treats mortal danger as a recreational activity? That's not even the weird part, sir, Quartermaster. They continued. They have something called caffeine withdrawal that apparently makes them more dangerous than most military-grade weapons. They consume a substance that is technically poison in order to function normally, and they do something called working retail, which according to these files builds immunity to psychological warfare. Dr. Scratch, the facility's cultural anthropologist, tentatively raised a claw. Sir, there's also the matter of their pack bonding behavior. Humans will apparently adopt any species as family, regardless of biological compatibility. The database contains records of humans forming emotional bonds with creatures that actively try to kill them. Elaborate. They keep predators as companions, sir. Creatures with claws and teeth that they call good boys and fluffkins. They also appear to adopt young of other species and raise them as their own, often with better success rates than the biological parents. General Krafnog stared at his research team. Then he stared at his ceiling. Then he stared at his emergency resignation forms, which were looking more appealing by the minute. So let me summarize, he said slowly. Humans are biologically impossible, psychologically incomprehensible, and apparently treat the universe like their personal playground. That's a fairly accurate assessment, sir, Dr. Yelix confirmed. And our prisoner? Would you like us to test some of these supposed abilities? Quartermaster, suggested. For scientific purposes, of course. 20 minutes later, Amy was standing in the research laboratory, surrounded by scanning equipment and very nervous alien scientists. She looked around the room with the casual interest of someone touring a mildly entertaining museum. "So what's the deal?" she asked. "Are you guys going to probe me or something? Because I should warn you, I had gas station sushi for lunch, and that's not going to end well for anyone." Dr. Yelix consulted her notes. "We would like to test your species' legendary resilience. According to our files, humans can survive extended periods without sleep." "Oh, that's easy. I once pulled 3 all-nighters in a row during finals week. Lived entirely on energy drinks and spite. My left eye started twitching, and I began seeing colors that don't exist. But I aced my exams." The aliens exchanged worried glances. Dr. Scretch stepped forward. "What about your supposed ability to function on minimal sustenance?" Amy shrugged. "College dude. I survived an entire semester on ramen noodles and whatever I could find in my roommate's mini-fridge. Lost 15 pounds and gained the ability to open packages with my teeth. And the pack bonding behavior? Oh, you mean like how I once cried watching a commercial about a robot that just wanted to make friends? Or the time I apologized to a houseplant for not watering it? Yeah, that's pretty standard human behavior." The research team was frantically taking notes. Dr. Yelix's scanner was making sounds that roughly translated to electronic sobbing. "One final test," General Kraftnog said, having arrived to observe the proceedings. "Show us this Florida man behavior." Amy's eyes lit up with a dangerous gleam. "Oh, you want to see peak human stupidity? Hold my imaginary beer." Before anyone could stop her, she had somehow convinced the detention facility's maintenance robot to give her a piggyback ride while she attempted to juggle 3 quantum phase crystals and sing what appeared to be a song about a man named Johnny, who went down to Georgia. The aliens watched in horrified fascination as she successfully juggled unstable quantum matter while riding a robot and providing musical entertainment. "Dear Universe," General Kraftnog whispered, "they're real, they're actually real." "Sir," Dr. Yelix said weakly, "should we update their file classification?" "Update it to what? Species that should not exist but does anyway." Amy finished her performance with a flourish, landing gracefully on both feet. "Ta-da! How was that for impossible?" The research team stood in stunned silence. "I think," General Kraftnog said slowly, "we're going to need a bigger database." Admiral Drahorn arrived at the facility with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for natural disasters or tax audits. His reputation preceded him like a particularly unpleasant smell, and when he swept into the main conference room, even the furniture seemed to straighten up and look attentive. "Where?" he boomed, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had personally stared down 3 galactic wars and a particularly aggressive audit. "Is this impossible being that has turned my entire detention facility into a comedy show?" Admiral Vashi, General Kraftnog, Judge Quintara, and the entire research team had assembled to brief him on what they were now calling the human situation. Their collective stress levels had reached heights previously thought impossible outside of theoretical physics experiments. "Sir," Admiral Vashi began carefully, "the subject is currently in conference room beta, drinking what she claims is terrible coffee and critiquing our interior design choices. She said our color scheme looks like a unicorn exploded in a paint factory," added General Kraftnog helpfully. Admiral Drahorn's 3 eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "Bring her here, now." 5 minutes later, Amy Kowalski strolled into the conference room like she owned the place. She was carrying a steaming mug of coffee and wearing an expression that suggested she was thoroughly enjoying herself. Well, well, well," she said, settling into a chair without being invited. "The big boss finally shows up. Let me guess. You're here to figure out why your super advanced computer system thinks I'm a fairy tale character." Admiral Drahorn studied her with the intensity of a predator examining unusual prey. "You are the anomaly that has caused my systems to malfunction." "Anomaly?" Amy laughed. "Buddy, I'm not an anomaly. I'm just human. Though I can see how you'd confuse the two." "Explain." Amy took a sip of her coffee and made a face. "Okay, first off, this coffee tastes like it was filtered through a gym sock. Second, You want to know about humans? Strap in, because we're a fun bunch. She leaned back in her chair, completely ignoring the dozens scanning devices pointed at her. So, humans, we're from a little blue-green planet that spent most of its existence trying to kill us. Ice ages, volcanoes, asteroids, super plagues, you name it. Most species would have gone extinct about 15 times over. But you survived, Dr. Yelix interjected. Oh, we didn't just survive, we thrived. See, here's the thing about humans that your computers can't process. We're incredibly stupid and incredibly stubborn in equal measure. When the universe says you can't do that, we say, hold my beer and watch this. Admiral Drahorn leaned forward. Your species survived planetary extinction events through stubbornness. Among other things, we also have this weird habit of making friends with everything. Seriously, we domesticated wolves, which are basically murder machines with teeth, and turned them into chihuahuas. We looked at some of the most dangerous predators on our planet and said, I'm going to teach you to shake hands. Quartermaster consulted his notes frantically. That explains the pack bonding behavior in our files. Oh, that's just the beginning, Amy continued cheerfully. We also decided that living on the ground was boring, so we figured out how to fly. Then we decided that our own planet wasn't exciting enough, so we strapped ourselves to controlled explosions and shot ourselves into space. Controlled explosions? General Krafnog asked weakly. Chemical rockets. Basically, we sit on top of massive bombs and hope they explode in the right direction. For fun and exploration. But mostly because someone said it was impossible. The aliens exchanged horrified glances. Then there's our approach to problem solving, Amy went on, clearly warming to her subject. Most species encounter a problem and think logically about solutions. Humans encounter a problem and immediately start thinking about the most ridiculous way to solve it. We once sent a car to Mars because we thought it would be funny. A car? Dr. Scretch stammered. Well, technically it was a rover, but we literally called it a car and played music for it on its birthday. We also sent a golden record into space with pictures of naked humans, just in case aliens wanted to know what we looked like under our clothes. Admiral Drahorn felt his primary brain beginning to short-circuit. You sent pornography to unknown species as a greeting. Art, Amy corrected, and music, and mathematical formulas. We figured if aliens found it, they'd either want to be friends or be too confused to invade us. Win. Your species weaponizes confusion. We weaponize everything. We made music so good it can make people cry. We invented food so spicy it can cause hallucinations. We created something called the Internet, that simultaneously contains all of human knowledge and the most ridiculous arguments you've ever seen in your life. Judge Quintara raised a tentative appendage. What about your supposed resilience? Amy's expression grew thoughtful. Oh, that's real. Humans are basically the universe's cockroaches. We survive things that should kill us, adapt to environments that should be impossible, and then complain about the accommodations. We've lived in deserts, frozen tundras, swamps, mountains, and places where the air itself is trying to poison us. Impossible, Dr. Yelix muttered. We also have something called teenagers, Amy continued. They're basically young humans who survive entirely on spite, bad decisions and the inexplicable ability to sleep for 16 hours straight while claiming they're tired. This is all documented. Admiral Drahorn asked. Oh, we document everything. We have entire museums dedicated to our failures. We celebrate them. We have a holiday where we specifically remember all the times we almost died as a species, and then eat too much food about it. Amy stood up and stretched. Look, the truth is, humans aren't mythological. We're just really, really good at being too stubborn to die. We're the species that looked at natural selection and said thanks, but we'll take it from here. We're the ones who decided that if the universe wanted us gone, it would have to try harder. She grinned at the assembled aliens. And apparently we're also the species that breaks your computer systems just by existing. Which honestly is pretty much on brand for us. Admiral Drahorn stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his staff. Classification update required immediately. What should we classify them as, sir? Admiral Vashi asked. Drahorn considered this carefully. real but inadvisable. Amy raised her coffee mug in a mock toast. I'll drink to that. The Galactic Classification Committee had never faced a crisis quite like this one. In the sterile halls of administrative building Zeta 7, normally reserved for quiet paperwork and the occasional filing cabinet uprising, pure administrative panic had taken hold. Maureen from the Department of Xenobiological Documentation sat across from Morton from the Bureau of Species Classification, and they had been arguing for the past 4 hours. Between them lay approximately 17,000 pages of forms, regulations, emergency protocols, and what appeared to be someone's lunch. I'm telling you, Moran insisted, his tentacles waving frantically, we cannot simply create a new classification category, because one species breaks our systems. Do you have any idea how much paperwork that would require? And I'm telling you, Morton shot back, her antenna practically sparking with frustration, that we cannot leave them classified as mythological beings, when they are clearly sitting in our detention facility drinking our coffee and insulting our furniture. Behind them, a small army of administrative assistants was frantically updating databases, filing emergency reports, and trying to explain to various galactic departments why their entire classification system had suddenly developed what could only be described as an existential crisis. What if we just file them under miscellaneous? Suggested Assistant Clerk Bezlek, looking up from a stack of forms that had somehow achieved sentience and was now filling itself out. Miscellaneous? Moran's voice reached frequencies that made nearby equipment start humming nervously. Miscellaneous is for species that change color seasonally or have unusual mating rituals, not for species that apparently survive through pure stubborn refusal to die. Then what do you suggest? Morton demanded. Because our current options are mythological, impossible, or error. Please try again later. Amy Kowalski chose that moment to wander into the administrative center, still carrying her coffee mug and looking like she was enjoying the chaos immensely. Hey there, she said cheerfully. I was wondering if anyone could point me toward the complaint department. Your detention cell has terrible Wi-Fi, and the room service is non-existent. The administrative staff froze like prey animals, who had suddenly realized they were being stalked by something that didn't appear in any of their survival manuals. You're not supposed to be here, Bezlek stammered. This is a restricted administrative area. Oh, I asked that nice security guard for directions. Told him I was lost and needed help finding the people in charge of fixing paperwork problems. He pointed me this way and muttered something about not my department and above my pay grade. Moran and Morton stared at her with the horrified fascination of beings watching their carefully ordered universe collapse into amusing anarchy. We are attempting to properly classify your species, Moran said stiffly. It is a complex bureaucratic process that requires careful consideration of multiple factors and extensive documentation. Amy blinked. Have you tried just asking humans what we are? The silence that followed was so complete that the filing cabinets stopped rustling. Asking you, Morton repeated slowly. Yeah, you know, direct communication. Novel concept, I know. Instead of consulting your mythology databases and having computer seizures, you could just send a message to Earth and say, hey, what's your deal? Bezlek looked up from his self-filing paperwork. That's actually not a terrible idea. It's a completely irregular idea, Moran protested. We have protocols, procedures, proper channels. And how are those working out for you? Amy asked, gesturing around the chaos-filled room where administrative assistants were now chasing escaped forms with butterfly nets. Point taken, Morton admitted, grudgingly. But even if we contact your species directly, we still need to create a proper classification that fits within our existing framework. Amy took a sip of her coffee and considered this. What are your current categories? Standard carbon-based life forms, silicon-based entities, energy beings, hive minds, collective consciousness species, and mythological creatures. Moran recited automatically. And none of those fit. You appear to be standard carbon-based life forms with impossible capabilities and a complete disregard for logical behavior patterns, Morton explained. You don't fit any existing category, so make a new one. We can't just make a new one. There are procedures, forms to fill out, committees to consult. The Bureau of Universal Standards would have to approve any new classification, and they haven't approved anything new in the past 400 cycles. Amy stared at them. You're telling me that your entire galactic civilization is being held up by bureaucratic red tape? Red tape? Bureaucratic looked confused. What is red tape? Is it another human cultural reference we should document? It means unnecessarily complicated administrative procedures, Amy explained. Like when you need 17 forms to change a light bulb. We actually do need 17 forms to change a light bulb, Moran said proudly. Safety protocols, environmental impact assessments, energy consumption reports. That's exactly my point, Amy interrupted. Look, here's a crazy idea. What if you classified humans as humans? Revolutionary concept, I know. The bureaucrats exchanged glances. But what would the official description be? Morton asked. We need technical specifications, behavioral patterns, biological classifications. Amy grinned. How about humans? They're weird, they're stubborn, they make friends with everything, and they refuse to die when they're supposed to. Approach with caution and a sense of humor. Bureaucratic was furiously taking notes. That's actually more accurate than most of our current classifications. I object, Moran declared. This is highly irregular. So are humans, Amy pointed out. Maybe it's time your system learned to be a little irregular too. In the background, the self-filing paperwork had formed a small parade and was marching around the room, while the filing cabinets provided what could generously be called musical accompaniment. I think, Morton said slowly, our systems are already learning to be irregular. Amy raised her coffee mug. Welcome to the human experience, folks. Population. However many of us are left after our latest attempt to befriend something that wants to eat us. Just as the administrative chaos reached what scientists would later classify as peak bureaucratic entropy, the main doors slid open with a cheerful hiss. Brandon Torres walked in wearing an expression that suggested he had seen this exact scenario at least 12 times before. Sorry I'm late, he announced to the room at large. Traffic was terrible, and I had to stop for coffee. Also, someone apparently forgot to mention that you'd arrested one of our citizens. Amy's face lit up. Brandon, thank goodness, these folks have been trying to figure out what humans are for the past day and a half. Let me guess, Brandon said, surveying the chaos with practiced ease. Computer systems crashing, mythology database confusion, and someone probably asked you to prove you're real. Bingo. Also, they have terrible coffee. Brandon pulled out a small device and began typing rapidly. Standard first contact protocol, 7 Alpha. Amy, I'm assuming you've been your usual helpful self? I may have demonstrated some peak human behavior, Amy admitted. There was juggling involved. Of course there was. Brandon turned to the assembled aliens who were staring at him with the shell-shocked expression of beings who had just realized their day was about to get even more complicated. Right then, Brandon continued briskly. I'm Ambassador Brandon Torres, official representative of Earth's diplomatic corps. I understand you're having some classification difficulties. Moran stepped forward hesitantly. Your species appears to be problematic for our administrative systems. Yeah, we get that a lot. Tell you what, let's make this easy for everyone. Brandon consulted his device. I'm officially registering humanity under the new classification species too stubborn to classify normally. Will that work for your paperwork? The aliens stared at him. Then they stared at each other. Then Bureaucratic started frantically typing on his console. That's actually brilliant, Morton admitted. It's accurate, it acknowledges the classification difficulty, and it doesn't break our system. Perfect, Brandon said. Amy, you're officially released with a formal apology from the Galactic Detention Authority. Also, here's your smuggling fine. Amy took the small card he handed her and grinned. 50 credits? That's it? Turns out quantum phase crystals aren't actually illegal if you're transporting them for scientific research. Who knew? Admiral Vesey, who had been watching this entire exchange with growing amazement, finally found his voice. You resolved in 5 minutes what we've been struggling with for 2 days. That's humans for you, Brandon replied cheerfully. We're really good at cutting through bureaucratic nonsense. It's kind of our thing. 2 hours later, Amy and Brandon were aboard a transport heading back to human space, while behind them the Galactic Detention facility slowly returned to something resembling normal operations. Admiral Vichy stood in his office, staring at the new entry in their species database. Humans, classification, species too stubborn to classify, normally. Note: approach with caution, coffee and a sense of humor. Do not attempt standard interrogation procedures. Do not consult mythology database. Warning: may cause existential crisis in administrative systems. Admiral Drahorn appeared in his doorway. How are we handling the aftermath? I've sent a priority alert to all galactic facilities, Vashi replied, warning them about human unpredictability and recommending they keep emergency stress relief supplies on hand. And the paperwork, filed under lessons learned the hard way. Somewhere in the distance a computer system hiccuped once, and then settled into what could only be described as resigned acceptance. General Krafnog's voice crackled over the intercom. Sir, we just received a message from the human homeworld. What does it say? Thanks for looking after Amy. She tends to get into trouble, but she means well. Also, you might want to update your coffee. Signed, Earth. Admiral Vashi closed his eyes and reached for his emergency stress gel. In the past 48 hours he had learned that the universe was far stranger, far more stubborn, and far more amusing than he had ever imagined. Note for the official record, he said slowly. Humans impossible to classify, impossible to understand and apparently impossible to forget.